Okay, so you want to own a senior care facility. You buy a nice building, hire compassionate nurses to care for the elderly, and collect steady fees from families who desperately need your help. It is a business model built on human kindness and absolute demographic necessity. And honestly, it is not a bad plan. Walk into a high-end assisted living community on a Sunday afternoon, and it feels like a utopian retreat. There is a grand piano playing softly in the sunlit lobby. Seniors are playing chess by the window, while smiling medical staff gently check in on residents. You watch that tranquil environment for 10 minutes, calculate the monthly fees in your head, and you think, this must print money. Here is the problem. You are being completely fooled by the surface-level serenity. A senior care facility is not really a healthcare business. It is a highly leveraged real estate and private equity financing machine that just happens to be disguised in medical scrubs. So, why do some of the most beautiful, fully occupied facilities suddenly file for bankruptcy overnight? Welcome to the math of aging. This is the business that looks the most humane on the surface, yet hides one of the most unforgiving financing structures in the modern economy. Let us look at what it actually takes to get into this game. You cannot simply rent a large suburban house, push a few hospital beds into the living room, and call yourself a senior care provider. The barrier to entry in this industry is a massive, unforgiving wall of capital expenditure and regulatory compliance. First, you have to acquire the physical asset. In the senior housing market, you are not competing with local mom-and-pop buyers. You are bidding against institutional money and real estate investment trusts for prime commercial real estate. If you are looking to purchase an assisted living community, the market prices these assets strictly on capitalization rates, which hover between 6.5% for Class A core market properties and 7.4% for non-core locations. Because of these tight cap rates, the valuation of the building is astronomical. You are paying an absolute premium for the property long before a single nurse walks through the front door. If you decide to operate a skilled nursing facility, the entry barrier is even steeper. According to 2024 industry data, acquiring a skilled nursing facility demands an average upfront investment of $83,800 per individual bed. Think about the sheer scale of that number. If your business plan calls for a standard, modestly sized 50-bed facility, you are immediately staring down a base acquisition cost of nearly $4.2 million. And remember, that multi-million-dollar figure only buys you the physical shell of the building. But the physical shell is just the beginning of your capital drain. You are not outfitting a boutique hotel. You are constructing a highly regulated, high-risk medical habitat. Every single architectural detail, the width of the corridors, the exact placement of bathroom grip bars, the specific airflow metrics of the HVAC system must comply with excruciatingly detailed federal and state life safety codes. Beyond construction, you have to purchase specialized residential medical equipment. You need commercial-grade kitchens capable of handling highly specific dietary restrictions, industrial laundry facilities to manage daily sanitization, and advanced tamper-proof security systems specifically designed to prevent memory care residents from wandering into the street. Then comes the bureaucratic toll. You must navigate a labyrinth of state licensing fees and secure massive operational cash deposits. You are required to maintain heavily padded financial reserves simply to prove to the government that you can meet the rigorous compliance standards set by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS. The state needs a financial guarantee that if your business goes under, the elderly residents will not be abandoned overnight. Add all of this together: the real estate valuations, the per-bed premiums, the medical-grade build-outs, and the regulatory cash reserves. Before you have collected your first dollar of resident revenue, before you have hired your first caregiver, and before you have admitted a single senior citizen, you have already spent millions of dollars. You are fully leveraged and deeply in debt just to legally open your doors to guests. How is it mathematically possible for a facility charging premium, out-of-pocket prices every single month to suddenly go bankrupt overnight? To answer this, you have to look past the friendly nurses and the elegant dining halls, and instead look closely at the corporate paperwork. The secret to the senior care industry, the single counterintuitive insight that explains why this business is so fragile for the people running it, yet so incredibly lucrative for the people funding it, is what we call the real estate versus care risk paradox. When you look at a senior care facility, you assume you are looking at one unified business. You are not. Behind the scenes, the corporate structure of these facilities is almost always sliced violently in half. On one side, you have the holding company, which is often structured as a real estate investment trust, REIT, or controlled by a private equity firm. On the other side, you have the operating company. These two entities might be owned by the exact same parent investors, but legally and functionally, they operate in entirely different universes. Let us look at the holding company first. The holding company does not care about medicine. It does not hire doctors, and it does not manage patient charts. Its only job is to own the physical dirt and the brick-and-mortar building. Once it owns the property, it leases that exact same building back to the operating company at an exorbitant, mathematically punishing rent. Often, these agreements are structured as triple net leases. This means the operating company is not just paying a massive base rent. It is also entirely responsible for paying the property taxes, the building insurance, and all the structural maintenance costs. The holding company essentially collects a massive, risk-free dividend every month, without ever having to fix a leaky roof or replace a broken commercial HVAC system. Now, look at the operating company. This is the entity that actually runs the business you see on the surface. The operating company is the one that hires the overworked staff, buys the specialized medical supplies, manages the chaotic daily schedules, and deals with the families. More importantly, the operating company is the entity whose name is on the medical and state licenses. This deliberate separation creates a brilliant, ruthless financial shield. The holding company extracts all the actual wealth. Through property appreciation and aggressive monthly rent collection, the heavy profits consistently flow upward. Meanwhile, the operating company is mathematically engineered to run on a razor-thin profit margin. Why? Because the operating company acts as the ultimate sponge for every single ounce of risk. If a caregiver makes a tragic mistake and a resident is severely injured, the family does not sue the holding company. They sue the operating company. If the government sends inspectors who find health code violations and levy massive regulatory fines, those fines hit the operating company. If a local labor shortage forces the facility to hire temporary staffing agencies at triple the normal hourly rate, that financial bleeding is entirely absorbed by the operating company. The profits are systematically siphoned to the top, while the severe liabilities are permanently locked at the bottom. The people providing the actual health care are left fighting for pennies to keep the lights on, operating an entity that is designed to absorb the blow of a bankruptcy so the real estate holding it all together remains untouchably rich. To see exactly how this brutal mechanism plays out in the real world, you do not need to look at a theoretical model or a financial textbook. You only need to look at the spectacular collapse of Genesis Healthcare in July of 2025. Genesis Healthcare was a titan of the industry. At its absolute peak, this was not a struggling local operation trying to fill beds. If you looked at their portfolio, you would see a sprawling corporate empire managing approximately 15,000 elderly residents across 175 distinct facilities, spanning 18 different states. From the outside looking in, this appeared to be the ultimate success story in the senior care sector. They had massive economies of scale, steady demographic demand from an aging boomer population, and facilities that were effectively operating at full capacity. If the standard assumption of the senior care business were true, that providing necessary medical care to paying customers naturally generates stable profits, Genesis should have been an untouchable fortress. But remember the core paradox. The wealth is extracted by the real estate. The risk is entirely absorbed by the operations. The foundation of Genesis's collapse was not a sudden, mysterious drop in demand for senior care. The crack in the foundation was entirely financial, driven by the aggressive mechanics of private equity. Years prior, Genesis was the subject of a massive leveraged buyout, LBO. In a leveraged buyout, a private equity firm acquires a company using a massive amount of borrowed money and then deliberately places the burden of paying off that debt directly onto the acquired company itself. For the operating side of Genesis, this meant they were suddenly saddled with a staggering $1.5 billion in corporate debt. Now, put yourself in the shoes of the operating company. Every single month, you already have to pay the exorbitant rent to the real estate holding companies. But now, you also have to service the massive interest payments on $1.5 billion of private equity debt. Where does that money come from? You cannot easily double resident fees without losing your clientele, and you absolutely cannot stop paying rent to the holding company. The only place left to squeeze is your daily operational budget. This financial chokehold translates directly into an operational catastrophe on the floor of the facilities. To service the massive debt load, the operating company is forced to ruthlessly cut corners. Because the most expensive line item in any care facility is labor, that is exactly where the bleeding starts. You freeze wages, you delay hiring new staff, and you stretch your existing nurses to their absolute breaking point. A caregiver who should be managing 5 residents is suddenly managing 12. This severe depletion of human resources inevitably leads to a sharp, dangerous decline in the quality of care. When staff are burning out, chronically exhausted, and sprinting down the hallways just to keep up with basic tasks, mistakes happen. Critical medications are missed. Fall risks are ignored because no one is watching the monitors. Preventable bed sores degrade into severe, life-threatening infections. The human cost is tragic, but in the brutal math of the operating company, it also triggers a catastrophic financial chain reaction. As care quality plummeted across their network, the lawsuits began to flood in. Families of neglected, injured, or deceased residents filed claims against the only entity they legally could: the operating company. By July 2025, the weight of the paradox finally crushed the operational side of Genesis Healthcare. The company officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. When the court filings became public, the sheer scale of the legal fallout was exposed to the world. The operating company was drowning under an estimated $259 million in pure legal liability, stemming from nearly 1,000 settled and pending lawsuits for negligence and wrongful death. The entity responsible for the actual health care had completely imploded under the dual weight of the $1.5 billion LBO debt and $250 million in legal claims. But here is the most chilling part of the entire case study, and the ultimate proof of the paradox. When Genesis Healthcare's operating company filed for bankruptcy in court, the underlying real estate did not vanish. The physical buildings, the valuable land, and the prime commercial locations across those 18 states remained completely intact. The complex corporate structure did exactly what it was engineered to do. It trapped the $259 million of legal liability inside the dying operating company, effectively shielding the massive real estate assets from the victims' families. The financial institutions that owned the physical dirt walked away with their capital protected, while the operational entity that actually cared for the elderly was left to absorb the fatal blow. Let us build a simulated profit and loss (P&L) statement for a standard 50-bed assisted living facility to understand exactly how this financial mechanism strangles the operator. We will look at the math strictly from the perspective of the operating company, the entity actually providing the daily care, hiring the staff, and taking on all of the operational risk. First, you must calculate your absolute revenue ceiling. Assume your facility charges a premium private pay rate of $6,000 per month per resident. If every single bed is filled to maximum capacity, your theoretical gross revenue is $300,000 a month, or $3.6 million a year. On paper, that sounds like a massive, highly lucrative amount of cash flow. But in the senior care industry, gross revenue is just vanity. The break-even line is your only reality. Next, we subtract the fixed costs. The heaviest and most unforgiving burden on your ledger is the commercial lease payment made to the parent holding company, or REIT. Remember the core mechanism. The real estate entity extracts the wealth through aggressive rent collection. For a highly regulated commercial 50-bed facility, that triple net lease payment, along with mandatory facility insurance policies and baseline administrative salaries, easily devours $130,000 every single month. This fixed cost is absolute and unyielding. It does not matter if your beds are empty, if there is a severe local economic downturn, or if you are facing a massive labor strike. The holding company gets paid first, in full, every 30 days. Then come the variable costs, which act as the true, unpredictable margin killers. In a standard business, variable costs usually scale down when you have fewer customers. In senior care, they can rapidly multiply. Your baseline variable costs include standard caregiver hourly wages, commercial food services, residential medical supplies, and facility liability insurance. Under perfect conditions, providing high-quality care, food, and medicine to 50 residents might cost you an additional $130,000 a month. But perfection does not exist in healthcare labor. If just 2 of your full-time night shift nurses quit unexpectedly, you cannot simply tell the elderly residents to wait until the morning for their medication or mobility assistance. You are legally mandated by state care ratios to fill those shifts immediately. Therefore, you are forced to call a temporary staffing agency. These agency nurses often charge double or even triple the hourly rate of your standard staff to cover emergency shifts. Furthermore, your liability insurance premiums are directly tied to your regulatory compliance. If being short-staffed leads to a minor health citation, those insurance premiums spike instantly. Suddenly, your variable costs skyrocket overnight, bleeding your operating budget dry while your monthly revenue remains completely flat. Now, look at the break-even point. If your rigid fixed costs are $130,000 and your baseline variable costs are $130,000, your operating company needs to generate $260,000 a month just to keep the lights on and zero out the balance sheet. At a rate of $6,000 per bed, you need exactly 43.3 residents to hit that number. That means your absolute break-even occupancy rate is nearly 87%. This is where the terrifying reality of the math sets in. Your maximum capacity is 50 beds. Your survival point is 44 beds. You are operating on a razor-thin, volatile margin of just 6 human beings. If your occupancy rate drops by a mere 5%, representing just 2 or 3 residents passing away or transferring to a higher acuity hospital, your operating cash flow instantly turns negative. You plunge into the red immediately. You still have to pay the massive rent to the holding company. You still have to pay the exorbitant agency nurse premiums for your short-staffed floor. And you still have to buy the daily food and medical supplies. The math reveals the brutal truth of the operating company's existence. You are trapped in a financial vice grip between a rigid, astronomical fixed-cost ceiling imposed by the real estate owners and a volatile, surging floor of labor and medical variable costs. There is no financial cushion. A mere 5% dip in occupancy is not just a bad quarter. In this highly leveraged structure, it is a fatal mathematical blow that triggers a death spiral for the care provider, leaving the real estate holding company completely untouched and ready to lease the building to the next naive operator. To truly grasp the fragility of this business model, we need to run a simulation. Imagine two identical facilities. They have the exact same architectural layout, the same geographical location, and the exact same initial cost base. They both pay the same crushing rent to their holding companies. Yet one will thrive, and the other will collapse into bankruptcy within a single calendar year. The difference does not come from a dramatic shift in real estate value or a sudden drop in the senior population. The divergence stems entirely from one uncontrollable variable: staffing, retention, and liability claims. Let us look at the good year scenario. In this reality, the operating company manages to hire a dedicated core of local nurses and caregivers. Crucially, they manage to retain them. Because the staff is familiar with the residents and the facility's daily routines, operations run like clockwork. There is absolutely no need to panic dial temporary staffing agencies. When the state health inspectors show up for their annual surprise visit, they find pristine records, proper medication logs, and a perfectly safe environment. The facility passes without a single deficiency citation. Because the labor costs remain predictable and liability insurance premiums stay flat, the financial mechanism works exactly as intended. That coveted 6.5% profit margin flows peacefully and uninterrupted into the pockets of the real estate owners. The operating company survives, collecting just enough margin to keep the lights on and prepare for the next year. Now, let us look at the bad year scenario for that exact same facility. The year starts with a severe, localized nursing shortage, a variable entirely outside the operator's control. Several senior nurses resign to take higher-paying jobs at a nearby hospital. Suddenly, the facility is out of compliance with state-mandated care ratios. To legally keep the doors open, the operator is forced to hire temporary agency nurses. These contractors do not just cost a little more, they command rates up to 3 times higher than the standard payroll. The operating company's cash reserves begin to hemorrhage instantly. But the financial bleeding is just the first domino to fall. Agency nurses, while qualified, do not know the residents. They do not know that the resident in room 204 has a history of trying to stand without his walker in the middle of the night. Because of this unfamiliarity and the chaotic floor transition, a tragic accident occurs involving an elderly resident. This single event triggers an immediate state investigation. The facility is slapped with a severe deficiency citation, and its Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services (CMS) star rating is brutally downgraded. In the senior care industry, your CMS star rating is your lifeblood. The moment that rating drops, hospital discharge planners stop referring new patients to your facility, and the pipeline of new move-ins completely freezes. The operating company is now trapped in a death spiral. They have zero new revenue coming in, astronomical agency labor costs, and a massive new liability burden. Under this immense multi-front pressure, the operating company runs out of cash and files for bankruptcy within 6 months. The absolute distance between a quiet, profitable year and a total corporate collapse is often just one unpredictable staffing crisis. So, If the operating companies are constantly teetering on the edge of a financial abyss, where does all the money actually go? This reveals the second major twist of the senior care industry. The true winners in this ecosystem are never the local administrators managing the facilities, nor the people scheduling the nurses. The real victors are playing an entirely different, heavily insulated game. They are the real estate investment trusts, AIEITs, and the sprawling private equity firms that hold the deeds to the land and the buildings. These institutional players have successfully engineered a brilliant, ruthless system where they collect massive, uninterrupted rent payments regardless of the chaos unfolding on the facility floor. It fundamentally does not matter to the holding company if the operating entity is struggling to make its payroll, if there is a severe nursing shortage, or if the overall quality of patient care begins to slip. Their lease agreements are ironclad, and their dividends are legally protected. They have successfully commodified human aging into a risk-free real estate asset, happily watching the profits roll in, while the dedicated healthcare operators are left to take the inevitable financial fall. Let us return to that Sunday afternoon in the sunlit lobby. When you look at the grand piano, the smiling nurses, and the peaceful residents, your instinct tells you that you are looking at a system built on compassion. You want to believe that the economics of aging are fundamentally tied to the quality of human care provided, and that a business operating with such vital demographic necessity must organically reward the people who actually run it. But the math of this industry tells a much colder, more unforgiving truth. The senior care business has never truly been a story about philanthropy, human kindness, or even healthcare quality. The entire ecosystem is intricately engineered as a financial extraction machine, designed to shield institutional capital while systematically suffocating the operational entities that take on all the human risk. In the end, the ultimate survival and profitability of these beautiful, fully occupied facilities do not depend on how well the staff treats the elderly. It is, and always has been, a story about exactly who owns the dirt underneath those hospital beds.